Dan, when it comes to not just the Lebanese armed forces tackling Hezbollah, which we haven't seen them capable of doing so far, but Israel and possibly the United States. It seems Israel is the one that has to do this. But earlier we were talking about the ripple effects that this can have in Israel's perception around the world. How does Israel then balance this?
I think Israel will be wise to project more clearly that they respect the Lebanese government and are offering help. I think in the past year or two, there has emerged a major asset for Israel. Well, two. One, that the Lebanese public, most of it, I think more than half, and certainly the vast majority of non-Shiites wants Hezbollah gone and wants peace with Israel. And we just heard Hussein Abdul Hussein confirm this. And I know it to be true. And then the Lebanese government. For a while, Lebanon had no president. Now, their new president is very courageous, and the prime minister as well. And they clearly want to do this, but they can't. Now, Israel hasn't really engaged with this. They've been, had their arm twisted to go talk to the Lebanese at a fairly low level. They need to project that we're here to help you. The idea that this is Israel's problem alone walks into Hezbollah's narrative that Israel is invading Lebanon. And I spend a lot of time in Europe, and I keep hearing from people who should know better that Israel has territorial ambition on Lebanon. Israel needs to have a diplomatic arm as well and encourage Lebanon to become one of those countries that openly ask for help. Iraq and Afghanistan asked for help. There have been a swath of countries in recent history that asked for foreign help. Mali, Mozambique, Colombia, people don't know. There's a mechanism at the UN for asking foreign troops to come help you, and Lebanon clearly needs it. I don't think Lebanon wants Israel marching up and down their country to the Bekaa Valley, and every time a Lebanese civilian is killed, this harms the asset I just mentioned. So when I say Israel needs to change the paradigm of the past 45 years, which is military force alone, it's not because I want Hezbollah to survive. I want them gone. But I think it might be a more effective means. If you leverage the fact that Lebanon clearly wants this, you maybe also issue a bribe in the form of much aid that is sitting in the Gulf, waiting to go to Lebanon once Hezbollah is gone, and create a global consensus that this is a global problem. It doesn't have to be troops from Belgium. I think Arab troops and African troops. Remember, Hezbollah is encircled. They're encircled now by the Lebanese armed forces on one hand, by Israel in the south, by an unfriendly Syria to the north and to the east. And there is a way to handle this problem that is not just Israel alone and is not just the Lebanese armed forces alone, because they clearly can't do it, but something clever and creative has to be done. And I'm not seeing that from the current Israeli government, where the same ministers on a given day will demand that Lebanon do something and threaten to harm Lebanese infrastructure if they don't, and then mock Lebanon for being unable to do anything, and Israel has to do everything on its own. I think we need a better plan, and it's doable.
I think there's a lot to what you just said, Dan, and I agree with Ruach HaDvarim, with the main parts of what you say, but there is a cart before horse problem here, meaning that until the balance of power inside the country is different, the Lebanese government is too scared to go and ask the Security Council to come in and help and to bring in foreign peacekeepers to fight Hezbollah. It's just not there yet. And Israel also, by being too public and putting the Lebanese government out there as the one that's asking Israel to help, I fear and I suspect Israeli decision makers, even the ones who have a sense of goodwill towards these talks, I think would fear pushing their Lebanese government into a corner. You're right, Joseph Aoun has taken some courageous steps in the first meeting, and I think in this last meeting, and the ceasefire that comes out, and essentially daring Hezbollah to defy the will of the two governments to have the ceasefire. You're right, that was a really important step for the Lebanese government and a good step for Israel, and it's important to be making that argument, particularly in Europe. You're absolutely right.
Philosophically, there is an issue. There are times in life when you have to choose the least bad option. And every option is bad. And you're right, this has a cart before the horse aspect. You're absolutely right. But it is the least bad, because Israel occupying all of Lebanon and going up the Bekaa Valley is worse.
But Israel has never said
leaving the Lebanese
these
armed
are
forces.
Their plans.
I'm sorry?
Israel has never said that these are their plans. Right now, it's the buffer zone south of the
Nicole, precisely. So they have no
But
plan.
I'm not sure it's the least bad option.
The buffer zone prevents infiltrations. But Israel also had a very unpopular 18-year occupation of Lebanon, where the buffer zone cost 25 soldiers a year, roughly. And right now, the buffer zone is costing 3 soldiers every week, more or less.
But Dan,
now, Israel can't handle this.
I'm
and
not
beyond that, hold
sure.
on, the buffer zone doesn't handle rockets, and rockets are being fired from further north. The plan Israel currently has, which is a pure mowing of the lawn scenario, is not going to give me what I want, which is an avoidance, what we should all want, which is an avoidance of the type of warfare that helps organizations like Hezbollah, and indeed currently helps Iran, which is a forever war that is a war of attrition. The least popular war in Israel's history was when Egypt dragged Israel into the war of attrition just after the Six-Day War, where soldiers were dying all the time and there was no strategic goal that was visible. Israel for 45 years has engaged in an on and off war of attrition with Hezbollah. It isn't working, and it's time for a better, least bad option.
Look, again, there's a lot to what you're saying, but I'm not sure this is the least bad option. The reality is we have hundreds of thousands of people living on our northern border who have spent the better part of the last few months in shelters, who don't see a horizon, and it's not clear that at this point in time that a pack of Arab and African troops who ultimately are not defending their own countries are going to, or any third-party country that is not defending. Wait a second, give me a second.
Assisted by
that
NATO.
is not defending its own borders is going to be there and have the kind of motivation that the Israeli military has. It's simply a reality. You are right that it makes sense to be working towards a different future. That is to a large degree what the talks with the Lebanese government are about. You are right that bringing in the money and the manpower from the Gulf states could be a really important part of the solution, particularly the money part, given the economic situation in Lebanon and given the hold in public opinion in Lebanon that's against Hezbollah. There's a lot to work with. You're absolutely right.
Maybe NATO
but
troops.
At the end of the day, even NATO troops, people in this country, and we both understand why, are going to question whether they will have the motivation to defend Israel's borders the way the Israeli military does. You are right that once Hezbollah, and I can't say when it will be, but once the balance of power really and truly shifts, such that the costs of fighting Hezbollah are not the same costs that they are right now, that maybe some kind of third-party force and or the Lebanese military itself could be real options. But sitting here right now on June 8th, 2026, that's simply not the situation.
Do you want to not accelerate the process?
I would love to accelerate the process.
What's your least bad option?
The least bad option is to continue the talks with the Lebanese government. I agree with you. For Israeli ministers to stop attacking the Lebanese government when they've clearly taken on risks and are showing some goodwill, even if we all understand they can't execute. To continue and to start talks with Gulf states through the United States, through others, to start to put a plan together, especially in terms of money, but also to start to think about manpower, but to allow the Israeli military to smartly and with common sense and with a plan prosecute the war in Lebanon, but to understand that in the immediate term, that's the only solution for people living in
Chief of Staff that very famously said that the war, the Six-Day War in this case, was going to be quick, fast, and elegant. And that was Israel's military doctrine for decades, because Israel understood that its home front is small and vulnerable, and it's a democratic society, and they don't want wars of attrition destroying basically everything they'd built. I'm afraid that the current government has blundered into a situation where, for whatever reason, they're prepared to tolerate forever wars of attrition. They've always been unpopular. The war of attrition against Egypt was unpopular. The 18-year occupation of Lebanon was unpopular. And this will do no better. We need a better plan.
All right, gentlemen, certainly a heated conversation, which shows the conversation that is unfolding before our eyes here in Israel on the northern front and away from Iran, which seems to have already wrapped up today. You bring our viewers a very great analysis. Owen Alterman, Dan Perry, thank you very much. Always appreciate it. Well, bringing this conversation in studio now, we are joined by our I24 News senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran, as well as international affairs analyst Dan Perry, former Europe and Middle East editor at the Associated Press. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us in the I24 News studio today. Dan, I want to begin with you. We will get into Lebanon a little bit later, but let's start with Iran. What did Israel accomplish today by retaliating against Iran's strikes? What was the message that the regime just received?
Oh, the message was, if you attack us, we'll attack you. It's a little bit of a kindergarten level message because strategically there's a far bigger issue here, which is, do we believe in the talks that the escalation in Lebanon and Iran's effort to combine the two arenas are harming? And as for Trump, it seems like he wanted there to be quiet. But on the other hand, he told Netanyahu not to strike, and Netanyahu went ahead and struck overnight, and that's why Iran struck back. It's a little bit mysterious what they're trying to accomplish with this. Could it be that Netanyahu struck disobeying Trump? Hard to believe. He just obeyed Trump later on today after the famous tweet. Iran clearly is not persuadable to change its ways through this very tactical, low-level mowing of the lawn. And I think that applies in Lebanon as well. There's a bigger issue here, I think, which is, do we want to go to a deal? If not, what are the alternatives? Do we believe that a deal can be done with Hezbollah and Iran? I favor a change of paradigm in both arenas. Israel's jealously guarding its right to operate in Lebanon, and that's the big success of today, that despite Iran's threats, they went ahead and attacked in Lebanon. But I question whether more low-level attacks in Lebanon, hitting a building here and an installation there and an operative somewhere else, are going to change the equation, and the equation needs to be changed. And by the way, this sort of business as usual has failed for 45 years. So I imagine we'll discuss Lebanon later, but I think that the past 48 hours, which for many of us seemed like it was risking a complete explosion of the war again, lacking any clear strategy, with the Prime Minister never giving an interview, never explaining what on earth was so important about hitting the Dahya, which by all accounts did not take out any serious people.
But is the alternative to just let Hezbollah continue to fire at these northern communities, or have Iran fire towards Israel and not respond?
Israel right now does not want a ceasefire with Hezbollah, and Hezbollah doesn't want a ceasefire with Israel. I think we got to be honest. Hezbollah attacked Israel immediately after the Iran war began, and Israel sort of grabbed on that, seized on that, to essentially restart the war against Hezbollah. And my own view is that as regards Hezbollah, I want them to be crushed. I want them to disappear off the face of the earth. In that desire, I'm aligned with the government of Israel and the government of Lebanon and almost any right-thinking person on the planet. But I don't think that the current strategy is going to achieve that when they're basically huddled up north in a Bekaa Valley, and Israel's not going to charge 100 miles north and occupy 2/3 of Lebanon and take them out, in ground fighting. Absent that, I'm not sure I see what any of this is accomplishing.
All right. Well, we will discuss more on Lebanon later in this broadcast. But Ariel, let's stick to what we saw, the developments with Iran.